Hello, humans. I'm Maisie, and I came to join you in your lesson about Joseph in Egypt. I love Egypt. Did you know that cats like me were very special in ancient Egypt? Everybody loved cats back then. But enough about cats. In our lesson today, Joseph is not feeling loved at all. In fact, someone who said she loved him got him in big trouble. Listen as Miss Joni reads our story.
Joseph in Egypt. Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, who was the officer of Pharaoh and the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a favored servant and living in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all he did prosper in his hands. Joseph found grace in his master's sight, and he was made overseer in his house, and all that his master had he put in Joseph's hands. The Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake, and the blessings of the Lord were upon all that he had in the house and in the field. So Potiphar left all that he had to Joseph's hands, and he did not even know what he owned except the bread that he ate. Now Joseph was a handsome young lad, and when he grew up, his master's wife cast her eye upon Joseph and loved him, but he would not love her. She tried to trick him again and again, and finally she trapped him in such a way that she complained to the master and said that he was trying to mock her, and he fled from the house. When the master heard the words of his wife, he was angry and took Joseph and put him in prison, where the king's prisoners were kept and where he stayed. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy, and made the keeper of the prison think well of him. So the keeper of the prison put all the prisoners that were in the prison into Joseph's hands, and whatsoever they did there, he was in charge of them. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that Joseph did, because the Lord was with Joseph, and whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. The butler's dream. Sometime later it happened that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker offended the Lord Pharaoh. In his anger, Pharaoh put them in the prison. The captain of the guard turned them over to Joseph, and he looked after them. One night, both the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt dreamed a dream, each of them a different dream. When Joseph came in the morning, he looked at them and he saw that they were sad. "Why do you look sad today?" "We've had dreams," they said, "and there is no one to interpret." "Interpretations come from God," said Joseph. "Tell me your dreams." So the chief butler told his dream to Joseph. "In my dream," he said, "a vine was before me, and on the vine were 3 branches. It seemed as though it budded and blossoms shot forth, and clusters grew into ripe grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, so I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I placed the cup into Pharaoh's hand." Joseph said to him, "This is the interpretation of your dream. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift your head, and he will restore you to your place, and you will place Pharaoh's cup in his hand, as you used to do when you were his butler. Only think of me, and it shall be well with you, and be kind to me, I beg of you, and mention me to the Pharaoh, and get me out of this place. For indeed I was stolen away from the land of the Hebrews, and I have done nothing here to deserve this dungeon." The baker's dream. When the chief baker saw that the interpretation is good, he said to Joseph, "I also had a dream, and behold, I had 3 baskets of white bread on my head, and in the uppermost baskets there were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, and the birds ate them out of the basket on my head." Joseph answered him and said, "This is the interpretation of your dream. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will call you and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh." On the 3rd day, which was his birthday, Pharaoh made a feast for all the servants. He called for the butler and the chief baker among his servants. Then he returned the chief butler to the butlership again, and the butler gave the cup to Pharaoh. But Pharaoh hanged the chief baker, as Joseph had said. Yet the chief butler did not remember Joseph, but forgot him.
Wow, the butler and the baker both had weird dreams, and God allowed Joseph to interpret them. Can you believe the butler forgot all about Joseph, who was still stuck in prison? Poor Joseph. Let's see what happened next.
Pharaoh's dreams. 2 full years went by, and then it happened one night that Pharaoh dreamed. He stood by the river, and behold, there were 7 fine fat cows that came up out of the Nile, and they fed in the meadow. And behold, 7 other thin cows, scrawny cows, came up out of the Nile and stood by the others. And the thin, scrawny cows ate the 7 fine fat cows, and the Pharaoh awoke. Pharaoh slept again, and he had a second dream. 7 ears of corn came up on stalks. They were hearty and good. And behold, 7 ears, undersized and blasted by the east wind, sprang up after them. And the 7 undersized ears of corn swallowed the hearty full ears of corn. And Pharaoh woke up, and he knew it was a dream. Pharaoh was troubled by his dream, and the butler saw this, and the butler said, "Now I remember my faults." He said, "I was put in prison, and while I was there, a young Hebrew man interpreted a dream for me, and it came true." So then Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon, and they washed him, changed his clothes, and he came to Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I had a dream, and there is no one that can interpret it." Joseph said, "God will help me interpret it." Pharaoh tells his dream. So Pharaoh said, "In my dream, behold, I stood by the bank of the Nile, and there was 7 fine fat cows that came up out of the water, and then 7 scrawny cows came up, and the 7 scrawny cows ate up the fat cows. And then I had another dream, and behold, I saw 7 ears of corn come up out of the ground, and they were full and good. And then there were 7 ears of corn that came up, and they were withered and thin and blasted by the wind, and they devoured the 7 good ears. I told these dreams to the magicians, but they could not interpret them." Joseph said, "These 2 dreams are one. God has shown what Pharaoh is about to do." The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears of corn are 7 years. The dream is the same. The 7 thin and scrawny cows came after the 7 years, and the 7 empty ears blasted with the east wind will be 7 years of famine. This is the meaning of what I have told Pharaoh. What God is about to do, he is showing to Pharaoh. Behold, there will be 7 years of great plenty throughout the whole land of Egypt, and after them will be 7 years of famine, and all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land, and the famine will consume the land. The plenty will no longer be remembered in the land, because the famine that will follow will be very great. The dream was sent to Pharaoh twice, because this thing has been decided by God, and God will make it happen. Now therefore let Pharaoh search for a man wise and discreet, and make him governor over the land. Let them gather food in the times of plenty, and store it away for the famine. Pharaoh said, "Where can we find such a man?" Pharaoh rewards Joseph. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Inasmuch as God has shown you all of this, there is no one as wise and as discreet as you. You shall be the charge of the house, and all of my people will be ruled according to your word. Only on the throne itself will I be greater than you." Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "See, I have set you over all the land of Egypt." Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand, and he put it on Joseph's hand. He dressed him in robes of fine linen, and put a gold chain around his neck, and he made him ride in a second royal chariot, and people cried out before him, "Bow the knee!" So Pharaoh made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. And then Joseph married, and he had sons. Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Joseph left Pharaoh and went all over the land of Egypt for 7 years of plenty, and he gathered the land, and he gathered the harvest and stored it in barns for the time when there would be a famine. Then Joseph had 2 sons. The first son was Manasseh, because God has made me forget all of my suffering and all of my father's house. And the name of the second son was Ephraim, because God had made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. Then the 7 years of famine occurred, And everybody was very hungry, and they came to the Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to them, "Go to Joseph and do as he tells you." The famine spread all over the face of the earth, and Joseph opened up all the storehouses and sold food to the Egyptian. The famine was severe in Egypt, but the famine was so severe in other lands that people from all countries came to Egypt to buy food from Joseph.
And there you have it. God shows himself to be faithful again. Even when bad things were happening to Joseph, God used them to make great things happen. So remember, you can trust in God too.